Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to Doctor, the show where no topic is too hot or too cold. Whether it's politics, religion, relationships, entertainment, or everyday life, you will be hearing from the experts. This show is not for the faint of heart or the faint of mind. But if you want to be inspired, you have come to the right place. And now, prepare to be enlightened as we introduce the host of Dr. Dr. Peter Tassi, and his close advisor, Dr. Fooch.
Welcome back to Doctor. Thanks for joining us again today, and we look forward to talking to you about a very special topic, missionaries, and the lessons that we can learn from the poor in the third world and the great missionaries that work with them. I don't know if you're anything like me, but I've got a brain like a block of cement. That's why sometimes they call me Cement Head. It takes me a lifetime to wake up and realize things that were told to me as a young man and that I may have experienced to some degree as a young man, but they never really sink in. How many times in our life are we given great advice, pearls of wisdom by others, whether it's parents, friends, mentors, and we hear it, but we don't really listen. We don't really take it in and follow the great advice we're given. That's happened to me all through my life. I've been given great pearls of wisdom, especially by my father and other great people I met in my life. And some of those people are the missionaries I worked with when I worked in the third world, and the poor that I worked with. Great pearls of wisdom, great testimonies of faith, inspiring words, inspiring actions, hope-filled and joy-filled, but they didn't really resonate the way that they should have. And I don't know the reason for that. You know, some of us wake up when we're 15 years old, some of us when we're 30, some 50, some 60. But we all have our own internal clock. We all have our own with different minds that are triggered at different points in our life. And so if you're young, and in my standards, young is anything under 50, and you've been told many great things in your life, but you never followed them, and you never took them in and made them a part of you, don't feel bad. You still got lots of time left to wake up and absorb these great pieces of knowledge and wisdom that you were given. I want to talk today about my work in the third world, in the missions. I don't know what inspired it, but it started around the age of 40. I decided that I wanted to go to the third world and work, in addition to the career that I had as an educator at that time. And I wanted to work with the poor. And I wanted to see what I could do to contribute. And this is another thing that we all want to do. We all want to contribute to the world in some way or another, make it a better place, leave our imprint of love. And through that, we also do it for selfish reasons, because we're in search of something. We're in search of meaning or purpose. We're in search of finding out what life is really all about and what role we play in this universe. And how is our role significant? How does it make a difference? So around the age of 40, for both reasons, I suppose, one being wanting to leave the world a better place in my own small way, and the other is to find purpose and meaning, I set off to the third world and worked in a number of countries with many, many great missionaries. I'm grateful for that, and I'm blessed that I had the opportunity to do that. And they left me with many wonderful messages about life. And just like the wonderful messages I learned about life when I was younger, I don't think it took full effect. I think I still had a cement head. My brain was like a block of cement. I took it in, I was impacted by it. I did find inspiration in it, and it was all wonderful. And to some degree, it changes you, but it didn't have the impact it should have had. And I think it was years later, into my mid-50s, approaching 60, that I started to really take in all of life's wonderful lessons, all those great people I met and was blessed to have in my life, and who have taught me so many wonderful things. But it's not too late. 60 is fine. And now I'm 65 and on a wonderful journey, finding a degree of peace and happiness that I never knew in my life. And I think a lot of it has to do with those wonderful people that were a part of my life and the wonderful lessons they taught me. So don't despair. If you've been blessed like I have, being inspired by so many wonderful people, and it hasn't really sunk in, don't despair. It will, if you want it to, and if you work at it. I guess that's one of the beauties of aging. It's the gift of getting older, is that we do a number of things. First of all, we reflect a lot more on those wonderful lessons, and we really incorporate them into our being. We work hard at developing our character, and we surrender. When we're young and energetic and full of life, full of spit and vinegar, there's no time for surrendering. It takes things in, spit them out, move on. Take things in, spit them out, move on to the next day. But the beauty of aging is that we learn to surrender. And in surrendering, we listen better, we incorporate these wonderful lessons into our actual being, and we get rid of the sins of self-righteousness and pride. Two of the things that Jesus told us about, warned us against, two of the greatest sins. Self-righteousness and pride. Those two things, those two sins, really prevent us from building the kind of character we need in our later years. And so, as we get older, we surrender to all the beauty and the ugliness, to all the joy and the suffering. And we abandon this false pride and this sense of self-righteousness. Today I want to talk to you about the lessons I learned from the missionaries and share with you a few stories. And I hope that they impact you the way they impacted me. First, I want to talk about Haiti. In Haiti, I worked in the mountains there in an orphanage. And every day I would take the pickup truck, what they called a bus. You'd grab it in the city and you'd take it to the House of Dying, where Mother Teresa's Sisters of Charity worked. And it was the House of Dying because people were dying. The House of Malnutrition and Dying, I think it was the proper term. And every day I would go there and hold the babies that were close to death because they were so malnourished. They had been starving for so long that it was hard to save them. And some of them did die. And there were older people as well who were suffering from diseases and malnutrition and starvation and these things that took their life. And the mission of the Sisters of Charity was to offer these people in their dying days, if they didn't recover, with some comfort and some love let them know that they're not alone. Even the infants felt the warmth of the body that held it, the love that was given to it. And I don't think that I've ever seen been in a situation that was as difficult as that was. And I'd watch the sisters work as I worked every day, and they didn't have any time to talk. They weren't into conversations and meetings and conferences and workshops. They were only there to work. And part of that working was that they weren't too communicative. They didn't spend time talking to you or chit-chatting. They were working. And so it was my mission to just work, keep my mouth shut and work, giving love to dying children. There was one sister that caught my eye, and we would occasionally glance at each other working, and I thought that I would approach her and ask her something, because I was in a real dilemma. Anyone who's seeking the meaning of life and the purpose of suffering and all these things that I was embarking on is tempted to cross the line and speak words in the house of dying to a sister that was too busy to talk. So I approached her and I asked her, I said, "Sister, I could bring you to Canada with me, back to Canada, and you can work there. And it's a beautiful country. There's no hunger or starvation. There's no diseases that are inflicting large masses of people and killing them. Everything is clean. We have electricity, and we have running water and clean water and washers and dryers and toilets and cars and shopping malls and everything you could ever dream of having. Basically, I could bring you to paradise rather than working here. Would you come with me?" It was kind of a rhetorical. It wasn't really in seriousness, but yes, but it was in seriousness, yes. You know what I mean. She looked at me and she says, "No, my place is here. This is where I stay." And I said to her, "This life that you live is a life of suffering. There's a lot of pain and misery here. Are you happy doing this work? You could be happier in Canada." And she says, "My happiness is not determined by my surroundings. My happiness is determined by doing what God calls me to do. And God called me to this work. And so here I stay, and here I am happy." Well, that shocked me somewhat to hear that response, and I was inspired by it as well. So there you go. There's someone who found happiness in the most miserable, the most suffering of situations, because she believed that she was doing what God called her to do. And so I put it out to you today. Is that how you can find your happiness? Not by living a life of love, imparting love on others, but by doing what God calls you to do. What has God called you to do? And are you doing it? And if you believe that God has called you to do something, and you don't do it, are you unhappy? And maybe you're unhappy because of it, because you're not doing what you've been called to do. And as you've heard me talk about in my previous podcasts, that we are all called to that one universal thing that does bring happiness, and that's love. I bring you now to the Dominican Republic with a great, great missionary, Father Lou Quinn. He was a great man who really changed the province of Ocoa in the Dominican. Many thought that if he ran for president of the Dominican, he would win. The people adored him. Tens of thousands adored him. He changed villages and towns and building houses, hospitals, building a small university. The list is endless to what this man accomplished. Father Lou Quinn won all kinds of awards. And he answered the call as a young man, a young Canadian man, and entered the Scarborough priesthood and went to the Dominican and never came back, and spent 40 years of his life there helping the poor. And he truly believed that he was answering God's call. And in that, he found his happiness. And I asked him once, alone at night, Father Lou suffered from all kinds of physical ailments as he was aging. And one of my jobs there, in addition to working in the missions, was to take care of him. So every day, 3 times a day, I would give him reflexology and massage, body massage. And he really enjoyed it. He'd lay there and you could just hear him moan and enjoy, like, from the release of the pain that he suffered, especially in his back. He had all kinds of back problems from living a life of such hard work and heavy work, working in the missions, because he wasn't just sitting around organizing for 40 years. He picked up the shovel and he worked. And so while we were spending time alone in those moments at night, talking about life and the work he did and the church and theology, a lot of my questions surrounded the issues of the church, theological questions. Like I would ask him, Father, do you believe that Mary was a virgin? Father, do you believe that the Pope can be infallible? Father, do you believe that the bread and wine is actually turned into the body and blood of Christ? Do you believe in transubstantiation or consubstantiation? I'd ask him all these theological questions, and he wouldn't really answer. He just kind of moaned as I massaged him and relaxed, and I didn't want to press him. But after a couple sessions, he did say to me, one night he said, Peter, you waste your time trying to answer all these theological questions about dogma and doctrine. There's only one concern you should have. Put the questions aside. Don't worry about finding the answers. And concern yourself with feeding the poor. That's what you're called to do. That's what I was called to do. And so, Father spent his life feeding the poor, bringing joy and hope to literally tens of thousands of people. And I learned an important lesson that day that really sunk in as the years went by, that we shouldn't concern ourselves with all the dogma and doctrines of our religion, with all the theological and existential questions that we ask ourselves, as much as we should concern ourselves with loving others. And this is where Father found his happiness, in loving others. So once again, we return to this theory that happiness is found through loving. And so I thank Father Lou Quinn for all the wonderful things he taught me, but that's just one that I share with you today. Now I want to move to Africa, when I worked with Father Herman Schultz in the missions there. And Father Herman was grew up, his father was killed, grew up in poverty. And without getting into his life story, Father Herman Schultz, there has been documentaries on him, and And you can find documentaries on him and Father Luke Quinn on the internet, on YouTube. But I was really moved by something that he taught me, and moved by many things that he taught me. He taught me so much. Such a great, great man. So I asked him, what brought you to work in Rwanda, which is where we were working in Rwanda, in the village of Musha, where he had his orphanage. And it was there that he worked for years, and then he got wind of that they were coming, the government was coming to kill him, so the Berlin troops came in and took him out and sent him to Europe. He had no idea what was going to transpire, which was the Rwandan genocide. So he was in Europe, living safe and sound, while his children were all massacred. And he went back to Rwanda, grief-ridden, guilt-ridden, no reason to feel guilty, but he felt that way. And he went back, and he reestablished his orphanage and spent the rest of his life working with the children there. And I asked him, why did you return? Why would you return to Rwanda, probably the poorest country in the world, and to such chaos and violence and danger, and live in these conditions and work in these conditions? You could do the same thing in many countries, set up orphanages, help children. And he says, I'm bound to live here because I told the children something. I told them that I love them. And how do you tell children that you love them and then leave them? Wow, I thought. The power of love. It supersedes all personal comforts and pleasures. It supersedes everything that we know of, that we live, and is in a transcendent level of living, this power of love. He could not leave Rwanda. He could not leave the children, not because he loved it there or because he wanted to be there because it was comfortable for him or for any other reason other than the fact that he told those children, I love you. And so that love bounded him to them forever. And here we go again with love. Love being the thread that holds really the universe together. And now let's move to Mexico. The Sisters of the Holy Trinity did wonderful, wonderful work in Mexico. They continue to do it. And I worked there primarily with a great, great sister, Sister Vera Comar. When she was young, she was one of the top 30 tennis players in the world. She toured the world in tournaments. She had a great future ahead of her as a young girl. They had high hopes for her. They thought that she had the chance of being the best tennis player in the world. And while she was in Spain, she met the Sisters of Holy Trinity and had some kind of religious, spiritual experience that caused her to leave the world of tennis and to join the sisters. So I went to Mexico to work with her and the Sisters of Holy Trinity with the street kids. So every day we would go out and work with the kids that lived under bridges and on the streets and in the sewers, and they'd live anywhere where they could find refuge. And one of the places that the sisters brought me was to Our Lady of Guadalupe, the Basilica. And I noticed there that hundreds of Mexicans, very, very poor, literally thousands would visit tourists around the world, and of course natives of Mexico would visit the Basilica every day. And I noticed that they would be on their knees. Many of these native Mexicans would be on their knees, and they would walk on their knees, some of them holding their children in their arms, their infants, to the basilica. And it was a long, long walk on their knees over this kind of cobblestone to the basilica. And I asked the sisters, why are they walking on their knees to the basilica? And they told me that they were doing that to give thanks to God. They were a people that were grateful. And I'd ask, grateful for what? You know, they live in poverty, which I saw in the mountains of Mexico when I went there and saw many lived in the city. And these people, they found gratitude in life. Gratitude for the love that God gave them. Gratitude for the love they found in community. Gratitude for the children that were born to them. Gratitude for the little bit of food they had. Their whole life was filled with gratitude and this desire to thank God and show God their gratitude through this short pilgrimage they would make on their knees to the basilica. And so here are people with such love, so much love that they were grateful for everything in life, as little as they had. And that was a wonderful lesson for me to learn about the gift of gratitude and how it is intimately connected to living a life of love and gratitude, and how that plays a major part in anyone's happiness. And finally, today, we could talk about hundreds of stories, but I want to end with this one. I want to go back to Rwanda and talk about the way the people were living when I was there, which was actually the 10th anniversary of the genocide. How much they loved each other, the people there, how strong their community was. And you had in that community Hutu and Tutsis living side by side. If you know the story of Rwanda, the Tutsis basically were the ruling class. And the Hutu, who are more native to Rwanda, revolted against them. And over 900,000 people were massacred in 90 days. The butchery and the murder and the violence was beyond what a human mind can comprehend. And here they were on the 10th anniversary, when I was there, living side by side, loving each other, caring for each other, helping each other. And I asked one of the Tutsis in the community, how do you live alongside these people, the Hutu, care and love for each other so much when it's these very people that massacred your people, massacred your own families? Some of them were, they saw their own families killed by these men. And they said that, they told me that, Peter, they asked me a question. They said, have you ever killed a man or a woman or a child? And I says, no, I haven't, of course not. And they said, then you don't know what it's like. You don't know what it's like to murder someone, to butcher someone. So how can you judge? How can you judge the murderer? They suffer in their own way with what they did. But today, now, we are brothers and sisters living together in forgiveness and in love. Well, that was pretty jolting to me, I'll tell you, that I don't think I could do it. I thought to myself, I don't think I could be that forgiving and loving. And it took years for that, along with all the other pearls of wisdom I learned in my life, to kind of sink in and take hold of me and help build my own personal character. It's an amazing thing what the missionaries and the people that are poor and suffered greatly, how much they taught me. And I hope that through this podcast today, they taught you something. And I hope that you come away from today with a little bit inspired and with some kernels of wisdom from the missionaries and the poor that will help you on your journey through life. Thank you for joining me once again, and I'm wishing you a great day and a great week.